The day my grandmother died felt like the ground had been pulled from under my feet. Her name was Marina Vale, and she had been the one person in my life who never made me feel small. When my parents argued or when the world felt unfair, I always went to her house. She listened. She understood. My sister Clara was there at the funeral too, standing in the front row, crying louder than anyone else. People hugged her and told her how strong she was. I stood a few steps behind. I watched. Clara had rarely visited Grandma in the last few years. She only came when there was something to gain. Still, she acted like she had lost the most. After the burial, the lawyer approached us. "Your grandmother left a will," he said calmly. "It will be read next week." Clara's eyes brightened for just a moment before she lowered her head again. I noticed. Grandma had once told me something while we were planting tomatoes in her garden. "One day this house will protect you," she said with a smile. That memory stayed in my mind as I drove home, because something deep inside me whispered one quiet thought. Something about this didn't feel right. 1 week later, Clara and I sat across from the lawyer in a quiet office. The room smelled like old paper and coffee. My hands rested in my lap, but my fingers kept moving. I felt nervous, though I didn't know why. Clara leaned back in her chair, calm and confident. The lawyer opened a folder. "This document is the final will of Marina Vale." My heart beat faster. Grandma had once told me that she wanted to split everything evenly between us. She believed family should always be fair. The lawyer cleared his throat and began reading. "The house and land are to be given to Clara Vale." I blinked. "The investment accounts and savings are also to be given to Clara Vale." My chest tightened. "The remainder of the estate will also be awarded to Clara Vale." The room became very quiet. Everything, every single thing, all of it went to Clara. I stared at the table, trying to understand. Grandma would never do this. Clara slowly turned her head toward me and smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who had already won. I stood up without saying a word and walked out of the office. But one thought kept repeating in my mind. Grandma promised me something different. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the garden behind Grandma's house. The two of us used to sit there for hours while she told stories about her younger days. She loved Clara too, but she always worried about her. "Your sister likes shortcuts," Grandma once said softly. "Life doesn't reward shortcuts." That memory bothered me now. Clara had walked out of the lawyer's office with a look of quiet victory. She didn't seem surprised at all. The next morning I drove to Grandma's house. Technically it belonged to Clara now, but she hadn't moved in yet. She was probably too busy celebrating. The key still worked. When I stepped inside, the house smelled exactly the same, lavender and old books. My chest tightened again. I walked into Grandma's study, the small room where she kept her papers and letters. Her desk stood near the window. I opened the top drawer. Nothing. The second drawer held old photos. But the bottom drawer was locked. That was strange. Grandma rarely locked anything. I searched around the desk until I noticed a small envelope taped underneath. Inside was a tiny key. My hands trembled as I unlocked the drawer. Inside lay a single sealed letter. It had my name written on it. My hands shook as I opened the letter. Grandma's handwriting covered the page. The moment I saw it, tears filled my eyes. The first line made my heart race. "If you are reading this, something has gone wrong." I read slowly. Grandma explained that she had created a will months ago that divided everything equally between Clara and me. She believed it was the only fair choice. But then the letter changed tone. She wrote that Clara had been asking many questions about money. She had visited often during the last few months, especially when Grandma was sick. "Something about it worried me," Grandma wrote. She said she had placed copies of important documents with her lawyer, but she also wanted me to know the truth if anything strange happened. At the bottom of the letter was one final sentence. "Trust your instincts." I folded the paper carefully. My chest felt tight, but my mind had become clear. Grandma had not changed her will, which meant someone else had. And there was only one person who could have done it.
Clara.
For the first time since the funeral, anger replaced my sadness. But instead of confronting her, I decided something else. I would find proof. The next day, I returned to the lawyer's office. His name was Mr. Alden, a quiet man with careful eyes. When I sat down across from him, he looked slightly uncomfortable. "What can I help you with?" he asked. "I want to see the will again," I said. He hesitated but eventually placed the document on the table. I studied the paper closely. Grandma's signature sat at the bottom. At first glance, it looked normal. But I had seen her write my birthday cards every year. I knew the shape of her handwriting. Something felt different. The curve of the M in Marina looked slightly wrong. "Did my grandmother sign this here?" I asked. Mr. Alden nodded.
Yes.
"Your sister brought her in a few weeks before she passed." My stomach tightened. Grandma had been very weak during those weeks. "Was anyone else present?" I asked. He shook his head. "Only your sister." That answer told me everything. I thanked him and left. Outside the office, the cold air hit my face. Clara had been alone with Grandma when this will was signed. Maybe she had convinced her. Or maybe something worse had happened. Either way, I needed proof. And I knew exactly where to start looking. I spent the next few days studying every old letter Grandma had ever written to me. Birthday cards, holiday notes, even small reminders she used to leave on the kitchen table. I compared each signature with the one on the will. The difference was small, but it was there. Grandma's real signature had a soft loop in the middle of the M. The one on the will looked forced. My heart beat faster. I searched online and found something interesting. Handwriting experts could analyze signatures and detect forgeries. It sounded expensive, but I didn't care. Grandma deserved the truth. I contacted a specialist named Dr. Hale, who worked in document analysis. A few days later, I met him in a quiet office. He studied the will carefully. Then he compared it with the letters I brought. He didn't speak for several minutes. Finally, he looked up. "This is suspicious," he said. My chest tightened. "Can you prove it?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "With a full examination, yes." For the first time since the funeral, hope appeared inside me. Clara thought she had already won. But the truth was just beginning to surface. While Dr. Hale examined the documents, I kept watching Clara. She moved into Grandma's house quickly. Within days, expensive cars started appearing in the driveway. New furniture arrived. Workers painted the walls and replaced the old wooden floors Grandma loved. Clara also began hosting parties. Music played late into the night, while strangers laughed in the rooms where Grandma used to read. Each time I drove past the house, anger burned in my chest. But I stayed quiet, because the best revenge required patience. 2 weeks later, Dr. Hale called me.
"Your report is ready," he said.
I drove to his office immediately. He handed me a thick folder filled with photographs and diagrams. Then he spoke words I would never forget. The signature on this will was not written naturally. My heart pounded. He pointed to several lines and pressure marks. "These signs strongly suggest the signature was traced." I stared at the evidence. Clara hadn't just manipulated the situation. She had forged the will. Dr. Hale leaned back in his chair. "If this goes to court," he said calmly, "the forgery will likely be proven." For the first time since everything began, I allowed myself to smile. Clara had stolen my inheritance, but she had made a mistake. Instead of confronting Clara immediately, I decided to wait. Revenge rushed too quickly often failed. I wanted the truth to explode at the perfect moment. So I started collecting more evidence. I spoke to Grandma's neighbors. One woman remembered seeing Clara bring Grandma to the lawyer's office during the week she was very sick. Another neighbor recalled hearing them argue loudly in the yard days before that. I wrote down every detail. Then something unexpected happened. One evening my phone rang. The caller was Mrs. Rowan, Grandma's old friend. "I heard about the will," she said gently. My chest tightened. "Yes." She hesitated before speaking again. "There's something you should know." She explained that Grandma had once mentioned signing papers she didn't fully understand. Clara had told her they were hospital forms. My hands began to shake. That meant Clara may have tricked Grandma into signing blank documents. After the call ended, I sat quietly for a long time. Clara thought she had taken everything. But piece by piece, the truth was rising. And when it finally came out, it would destroy her world. After my call with Mrs. Rowan, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. The room was quiet, but my thoughts were loud. If Clara had tricked Grandma into signing blank papers, then the forged will might not have been the only document she created. That idea made my stomach twist. The next morning, I drove back to Grandma's house. Clara's new car was gone, which meant she was probably out. I stayed across the street for a while, watching the windows. When no one appeared, I walked up to the door and knocked. No answer. I still had my key. Inside, the house looked different. The warm colors Grandma loved were gone. Cold white paint covered the walls. The old couch had been replaced by something modern and stiff. It didn't feel like home anymore. I walked straight to Grandma's study. Clara had cleared most of the drawers, but she missed something. A small notebook sat behind a stack of empty folders. Inside were Grandma's notes from her last doctor visits. At the back of the notebook was a single sentence that made my heart pound. Clara brought papers today. I signed because she said it was urgent. I closed the notebook slowly. Clara thought she had erased every trace, but Grandma had been leaving clues. I copied the page from Grandma's notebook and left the house before Clara returned. Later that evening, I received another call from Dr. Hale. I found something interesting, he said. My heart beat faster. He explained that the signature on the will showed signs of tracing, but there was another strange detail. The ink pressure was uneven. That often happened when someone signed a document while weak or confused. Grandma had been very sick in her final weeks. Clara could have taken advantage of that. Dr. Hale also pointed out something else. The date on the will and the date of the signature don't fully match, he said. I frowned. What do you mean? The document says it was signed on the 12th, he explained, but the ink pattern suggests it may have been added later. My chest tightened. Clara might have prepared the document after Grandma had already signed blank pages. That meant this wasn't just forgery. It was planned. Carefully planned. When the call ended, I stared at the evidence spread across my table. Clara believed she had buried the truth. But every new detail only made the case stronger. And soon she would realize her perfect plan wasn't perfect at all. Over the next few days, I continued gathering evidence. I contacted the hospital where Grandma had stayed during her final illness. At first, the staff refused to discuss anything. Patient privacy laws made it difficult. But one nurse remembered me. Her name was Nina. You visited your grandmother almost every evening, she said kindly. I nodded. Do you remember my sister bringing documents for her to sign? I asked. Nina hesitated. Then she sighed. Yes, I remember something like that. My pulse quickened. She explained that Clara had visited during one afternoon when Grandma was very tired from medication. Clara had asked the nurse to step out for a moment. When Nina returned, Grandma was holding a pen and looking confused. She kept asking what the papers were for, Nina said softly. I felt anger rise in my chest. Did Clara explain? I asked. Nina shook her head. She just told your grandmother not to worry and said it was paperwork for medical care. That was the moment everything became clear. Clara hadn't just forged a will. She had manipulated a sick woman who trusted her. And that truth would soon destroy her. With Nina's statement and Dr. Hale's report, the picture became much clearer. But I still needed something stronger. Something that would leave no doubt. Then I remembered the security cameras outside the lawyer's building. A few days later, I visited the office again. Mr. Alden looked surprised to see me. I need a small favor, I said. At first he refused. But when I explained my suspicions and showed him Dr. Hale's report, his expression changed. If this is true, he said slowly, I need to know. He agreed to review the security footage from the day the will was signed. We watched the recording together. The video showed Clara helping Grandma out of the car. Grandma moved slowly and looked weak. Then something important happened. Clara handed Grandma a folder before they even entered the building. Grandma signed something while standing beside the car. Mr. Alden leaned forward. "That's strange," he said. "Why?" I asked. "Because she already had a signed document before coming inside." My heart pounded. That meant the Real signing might have happened outside the office, exactly where no witnesses were present. Clara had been careful, but not careful enough. The evidence continued to build. Dr. Hale finalized his full report, which clearly explained how the signature on the will had likely been traced. Nina agreed to write a statement describing the hospital visit, and the security footage proved that Clara had brought documents with her before entering the lawyer's office. Still, I didn't rush to confront her. Instead, I watched. Clara was living like a queen. She hosted more parties, bought expensive jewelry, and bragged to everyone about her good fortune. Friends filled the house every weekend. Sometimes I saw photos online. Clara smiling beside the garden Grandma loved. Clara sitting in the reading chair Grandma used every morning. Each picture made my chest tighten. But it also strengthened my patience. Because the bigger Clara's celebration became, the harder her fall would be. Then one evening I received a message. It was from Clara herself. "Family dinner this Friday," the message read. "Everyone will be there." I stared at the screen. For the first time in weeks, Clara wanted to see me. A slow smile spread across my face. She had no idea what was coming. Friday evening arrived with cold rain tapping against my car window. Clara's house was bright with lights and laughter when I arrived. Cars lined the driveway. Inside, relatives filled the living room. Music played softly while people talked and drank. Clara stood near the fireplace, wearing an elegant red dress. She looked confident, happy. When she saw me, her smile widened slightly. "I'm glad you came," she said. I nodded and greeted the others politely. Dinner was loud and cheerful. People shared memories of Grandma. Some of them thanked Clara for taking responsibility for the house. Clara accepted their praise easily. Halfway through the meal, she raised her glass. "I want to thank everyone for supporting me," she said. Her voice was calm and proud. "Grandma trusted me with everything she built, and I promise I will honor that." Several relatives clapped. I remained silent. Clara looked at me briefly. Then she smiled again. But she didn't notice the folder resting quietly beside my chair. Inside it were the documents that would destroy her lies. And the moment to reveal them was coming. After dinner, everyone gathered in the living room. The rain outside had stopped, and the windows reflected the warm lights of the house. Clara stood near the center of the room, still smiling. I took a deep breath and stood up. "I'd like to say something," I said. The room grew quiet. Clara's smile faded slightly. I walked to the coffee table and placed my folder down. "My sister said Grandma trusted her with everything." I continued. "That statement deserves some attention." Clara crossed her arms. "What are you talking about?" I opened the folder slowly. Inside were copies of Dr. Hale's report, Nina's statement, and photographs of the will. The signature on the will was traced, I said calmly. Murmurs spread through the room. Clara laughed nervously. "That's ridiculous." But I wasn't finished. I placed another document on the table. "This is a statement from the nurse who saw you bring papers to Grandma while she was sick." Clara's face changed. The room became silent. Then I spoke one final sentence. "And we also have security footage showing you giving Grandma documents before entering the lawyer's office." Clara's confidence disappeared. For the first time that night, she looked afraid. The room erupted with whispers. Some relatives leaned forward to look at the documents on the table. Others stared at Clara in shock. "This is nonsense," she said quickly. Her voice sounded thinner now. I remained calm. "The handwriting analysis shows the signature was traced," I said. "And the hospital witness confirms you gave Grandma papers while she was confused from medication." Clara shook her head. "You're lying." But the words lacked strength. Mr. Alden, the lawyer, stepped forward from the back of the room. He had quietly arrived earlier after I invited him. "I have reviewed the evidence," he said firmly, "and I believe a formal investigation is necessary." Clara's eyes widened. "This is my house," she shouted. But no one responded. Instead, the room filled with heavy silence. For the first time, people began to see Clara differently. Not as the grieving granddaughter, but as someone who may have betrayed her own family. Clara looked at me with anger and panic mixed together. "You planned this," she whispered. I met her gaze. "Yes," I said quietly. "But you started it." The days after the dinner party were chaotic. Mr. Alden reported the evidence to legal authorities. Soon investigators began reviewing the will. Clara tried to defend herself. She claimed Grandma had willingly signed the document. But the evidence told a different story. Dr. Hale's report explained the trace signature in detail. Nina's statement described the hospital visit. And the security footage showed Clara handing Grandma papers before entering the office. One by one, the pieces fit together. Family members who once supported Clara began stepping away. Some called me to apologize. Others simply stayed silent. Clara stopped hosting parties. The house became quiet again. Sometimes I drove past and saw the lights off inside. Weeks later, the court made an important decision. The will was declared invalid until the investigation finished. That meant Clara could no longer claim the inheritance. But the story wasn't over yet, because investigators were now asking a bigger question. Not just whether the will was false, but whether Clara had committed fraud. And if that was proven, everything she had built would collapse. The investigation began 2 weeks after the dinner party. At first, I tried to stay calm, but every phone call made my heart jump. Lawyers, investigators, and relatives kept asking questions about Grandma's final months. Clara avoided everyone. She stopped answering calls and rarely left the house. The once bright windows now stayed dark most nights. One afternoon, an investigator named Mr. Keller asked to meet me. We sat in a quiet office while he reviewed the evidence I had collected. Dr. Hale's handwriting report, Nina's statement from the hospital, the security footage outside the lawyer's building. Mr. Keller studied each document carefully. "This is strong evidence," he said. My chest tightened. "But we need one more thing," he added. "What?" I asked. "Proof that your grandmother never intended to leave everything to your sister." I thought about that for a moment. Then a memory surfaced. Grandma once mentioned keeping copies of important papers in a safe place, just in case something ever went wrong. I hadn't thought about it since the funeral. But now the memory felt important. Maybe somewhere, hidden quietly away, Grandma had left the final piece of truth. That night I searched through every memory I had of Grandma's habits. She was careful with her paperwork. Very careful. Suddenly, I remembered something she once told me while we were cleaning the kitchen. "If anything ever happens, check the bank box," she said. At the time, I thought she was joking. Now I wasn't so sure. The next morning, I went to the local bank where Grandma had kept her accounts. The manager confirmed something surprising. Grandma did have a safety deposit box, and my name was listed as an authorized person. My heart began pounding. Inside the small private room, the manager placed the metal box in front of me. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were several documents, some old photographs, and a sealed envelope. The envelope had Grandma's handwriting. Original will. My breath caught. Carefully, I opened it. Inside was a signed legal document. The date was 6 months earlier. And just like Grandma promised, the inheritance was split equally between Clara and me. For a moment, I couldn't move. Grandma had protected the truth all along. I immediately contacted Mr. Keller and Mr. Alden. When they saw the original will, their reactions were instant. "This changes everything," Mr. Alden said. The document was signed, dated, and witnessed by 2 people from the law office. It was completely legal, which meant the will Clara presented had replaced the real one. And since the signature on Clara's version was already suspected to be forged, the case became much more serious. Within days, the investigation expanded. Authorities examined Clara's bank accounts and phone records. They also questioned several people who attended the lawyer's office that week. One assistant remembered something important. Clara had asked many questions about how wills could be updated or replaced. At the time, it seemed harmless. Now it looked suspicious. The evidence continued stacking up. Clara tried to defend herself through her lawyer, but every new detail made her story weaker. Soon the case moved to court, and for the first time since everything began, Clara would have to face the truth in front of everyone. The courtroom felt cold and quiet the day the hearing began. I sat behind our lawyer, while Clara sat across the room. She looked very different from the confident woman who hosted those parties. Her eyes were tired, her shoulders tense. When the judge entered, the entire room stood. Then the evidence began. Dr. Hale explained the handwriting analysis in clear detail. He showed how the signature on Clara's will had been traced from another document. Next, Nina described the hospital visit. She told the court how Clara had asked her to step out while Grandma signed papers. The room stayed silent. Then the original will from the safety deposit box was presented. The judge studied it carefully. 2 witnesses from the law office confirmed the document was authentic. Clara's lawyer tried to argue that Grandma might have changed her mind later, but the evidence showed something else. The later will had been created under suspicious conditions, and the signature was not natural. As the hearing continued, I noticed Clara staring at the table. For the first time in her life, shortcuts were failing her. The investigation revealed something even worse. During the final weeks of Grandma's life, Clara had taken control of several small financial accounts. At first, the transfers seemed normal, but investigators noticed a pattern. Money had been moved slowly into Clara's personal account. Not huge amounts,
Just small pieces at a time.
but together they added up to thousands. When the judge heard this information, the courtroom became even quieter. Clara's lawyer tried to explain the transfers as family support, but the explanation sounded weak. Grandma had never mentioned giving Clara control of her money, and the hospital records showed she was too sick to manage finances during that time. Clara finally spoke. Her voice shook. "I was only helping," she said. But the evidence told another story. It showed planning. It showed manipulation. And it showed someone slowly taking advantage of a person who trusted her. By the end of the day, Clara looked completely defeated. The confident smile she once wore had vanished. Now there was only fear. A week later, the judge delivered the decision. The courtroom was completely silent. First, the judge declared the later will invalid. The trace signature and suspicious signing process made the document unreliable. Then the judge recognized the original will from the safety deposit box as the true legal document. That meant the inheritance would be divided equally between Clara and me. But the decision didn't stop there. The investigation into the forged will and financial transfers would continue. Clara now faced serious legal consequences. When the judge finished speaking, Clara lowered her head. The woman who once celebrated her victory now looked broken. Outside the courtroom, reporters asked questions, but I ignored them. I wasn't interested in attention. I only wanted the truth. Grandma had always believed fairness mattered more than money. Now that fairness had finally been restored. But even as the case ended, I felt something strange. The house, the garden, the memories. They were never really about inheritance. They were about something much deeper. Respect.
Trust.
And the cost of betraying both. Weeks passed after the court decision. The house officially became shared property between Clara and me, just like Grandma wanted. But Clara no longer wanted to live there. Legal fees and investigation costs had drained most of her money. She sold her expensive car. The parties disappeared. Even many of her friends stopped visiting. Eventually, Clara moved to a small apartment across town. We rarely spoke. One afternoon, she came to the house to collect a few remaining items. We crossed paths in the garden. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, she looked at me. "I didn't think you would fight back," she said quietly. I studied her face. She looked older now. Tired. "You should have trusted Grandma's wishes," I replied. Clara nodded slowly. Then she walked away, without another word. I watched her leave through the front gate. In that moment, I realized something important. My revenge was never about destroying Clara. It was about protecting the truth. And now the truth had finally won. Months later, life felt calm again. I moved into Grandma's house and slowly restored it the way she loved. The cold white walls Clara painted were replaced with warm colors. The garden came back to life. Tomatoes grew again in the small beds where Grandma and I once worked side by side. One evening I sat on the porch as the sun set behind the trees. In my hands was the letter Grandma left in the locked drawer. I read the final line again. Trust your instincts. For a long time, I watched the quiet yard. Clara had tried to take everything. The house, the land, the legacy Grandma built. But greed had blinded her. Instead of gaining more, she lost nearly everything. Meanwhile, the truth had protected what truly mattered. Family history, honesty, and the lessons Grandma always tried to teach us. As the evening breeze moved through the garden, I smiled softly. Because in the end, the inheritance wasn't the money. It was the truth. And the truth always finds its way home.